When we talk about oscillations, knowing about the basics of sine waves as a mathematical function is very, very helpful. You may have studied sine waves and cosine waves in a pre-calculus course, so if you've already done that, you may not need to watch this video. If you haven't done that, you need to know a little bit about sine waves to understand the next topic, where we're going to look at how sine waves help us understand oscillations really well. So I'm just going to talk about the very basics of sine waves here. Now, you probably have done things like SOHCAHTOA already, but we can actually graph y equals sine x as a function, and it's got a really cool structure. So here's a basic axis, and I've drawn some particular xy numbers on the axes. So the x-axis has pi's, so pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and 4 pi, and the y goes really from -1 to 0. Now, this is what the sine graph looks like. The sine graph has what's called one period that goes from x is 0 to 2 pi, up to here. And the sine graph on the y goes between -1 and 0. So the sine graph starts with y at 0. Let's use a blue color here. So I'm going to draw on here, and then it goes up, and then comes back to the middle, and then it goes down, and then back to the middle. And you can connect the dots like that. And it's gonna repeat after that. So it goes middle, up, middle, down, middle. I'm gonna draw the next cycle. Okay, so that's what the sine graph looks like. Kind of like a wave. Shoo, 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 like that. So it has a height of 1 and -1, and it goes between those ones, up, down, and it has what we call a period. So here the period is 2 pi. So the idea is if I go from 0 to 2 pi, I've completed one cycle, and if I just go another 2 pi between 2 pi and 4 pi, I'm going to complete another cycle. And this graph will go on into infinity that way as well as that way. So we're going to have a period, and then another period, and then another period. So that's the basic idea of a sine wave. Now, we can do some things mathematically to adjust this function. We can do things called vertical expansions and horizontal expansions. So if I take y equals 2 sine x, I'm going to get a vertical expansion and make it bigger. So it's now going to go between 0 and 2, as well as I can change the number in front of x and get a period change. So if I put 2 inside the sine graph, what's going to happen is actually going to compress the period. The period will now be 0 to pi. So that's the basics of the graph. What you need to be familiar with, for the sake of AP Physics, is the basic structure of this graph and how it applies to the oscillations. You're not going to be expected to go from the numbers and to be able to reproduce a sine graph straight up. That's what you do in pre-calculus. But you will be having to understand how this connects to oscillations, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next video.